Credible Money Talks across Singapore, Indonesia, India, and Philippines. Credible Talks with credible analytics.
Hello, money. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first episode of Credible Money Talks in 2026. We deliberately waited for January to pass before we recorded this episode. We were not here to follow headlines, nor we were chasing trend narratives, but we wanted to report what was or what is happening actually on the ground. Because today, separating facts from AI-generated news and hawks stories and bizarre opinions is not easy. So we believe that verifying performance is best based on verified outcomes which are measurable on the ground. So in this episode, I want to share what we personally observed as validated and confirmed outcomes as a basis for evaluating the performance of our dear President Prabowo's new government. First, let me start with Pertamina. Pertamina has always been the center of public attention, and every administration in the past has talked about reform, efficiency, and governance. But for decades, there was very little measurable or quantifiable change, or rather these rhetoric were used to further suck money out of Pertamina in the pretext of trying to correct the direction. And hence, consumers never saw any value in Pertamina. What many people don't realize that is Indonesia's retail fuel business of Pertamina is dominated by private franchises. So while the brand is Pertamina, the fuel stations are mostly owned and managed by private franchises. There's actually codes of ownership which are stated in the Pertamina fuel stations. Not many people are aware of that. So if code 31 -- means it's owned and managed directly by Pertamina. But code 34 -- means it's privately owned and managed privately as a franchise of Pertamina. This, for years, was an open secret that the code 34 fuel stations found ways to extract profit through quantity and manipulation, fuel adulteration, and simply employing weak oversight scenarios. So hence consumers paid the price, got poor fuel quality, quantity, and well, as a result, automotive engines got damaged. There's no trust in Pertamina, and this has been going on for decades. As a result, new players entered the market, such as Shell, etc., and this gave consumers a breather to get access to good fuel, though at a higher price. But then now, Prabowo's new government came in, and there was initially a state of chaos as adulterated fuel in Pertamina went to its peak in August up till November 2025, which damaged numerous vehicles. It was in headlines for a couple of weeks, and hence all consumers, fled to Shell and others. But then there was also a policy in transition in the same period where the government said import of fuel has to be centralized. So Prabowo's government drew a very clear line that only the government is allowed to import fuel into Indonesia via Pertamina. So this decision changed the entire landscape of the fuel business, and private operators lost access to supply, and not because it was not available, but because of the new policy that they are no longer allowed to source their fuel from their preferred politically aligned sources that met their specific quality and compliance standards, but presented higher prices for consumers. And in the process, the Indonesian government was at loss. Now, but despite all these issues, what happened next matters most. Pertamina surprisingly responded seriously. Standard operating procedures were revamped, quality control systems were put in place, oversight became continuous, And I'm not exaggerating. Today, fuel quality and quantity is validated every 24 hours, pump by pump, nozzle to nozzle, directly on site. This is a remarkable change in direction, and this kind of control never existed. And today, after 30 to 40 years, I can say that I have seen clearly that every pump of Pertamina, from every nozzle, we are able to get guaranteed good quality fuel at a very fair price. And because the government is able to import fuel from the best source possible at the cheapest price, in alignment with its political alliances worldwide, and hence this is benefiting the public. So today we can say fuel adulteration, which was persistent, is effectively stopped in Pertamina. Now, this did not happen by accident, nor was it luck, right? So this has happened because enforcement finally matched policy. When President Prabowo first spoke about protecting people's interest, many people, including myself, were skeptical. This was considered as rhetoric, and we did not have much trust in his words. But now what we're seeing on the ground indicates real structural change. Not perfect, not finished, a lot of things to be done, but seems real. I would assign 20 points out of 100 for this material change which we are seeing on the ground as real evidence of progress. Now, the second point that deserves attention is the success story in agriculture. One of the most important milestones to achieve self-sufficiency is or was the medium of imports of rice in Indonesia. All experts, when the program was thought about to be self-sufficient in rice, indicated it will take 2 to 3 years at least to be self-sufficient in rice. But Prabowo's government, from the day one that they took office, they took very aggressive steps, and they were on it from day one, distributing fertilizers and seeds effectively, and thinking of irrigation issues and machinery infrastructure for farmers, the working capital issues for farmers, and distributing and distribution prices, lockup, etc., etc. And a record time of 8 to 9 months was enough for Indonesia to be self-sufficient in rice, and not just self-sufficient, with excess of rice to potentially export. That is an amazing record in such a short span of time. And this, I think, we need to give credit to Prabowo's administration and our very, very capable Minister of Agriculture, Pa Amran, is an amazing person behind this story of success. So this is big news. And they're not stopping at rice. They are going forward with other commodities in the agribusiness as well. So it takes some time, but I think in this direction is indicating a big transition in the agribusiness for Indonesia. And Indonesia is an agri-based economy. And I think for the first time, we're seeing signs of strength in this sector. And it's a great outlook going forward. So I would assign another 20 points for this deliberate and serious effort to achieve this success. I think we have to give Prabowo's government credit where it's due on this. Another point where we see on the ground changes is on commodity exports. Indonesia's commodity exports have long been an issue where export volumes were not in line with the commodities extracted on the ground, and commodity price that was registered in the books of the government were not in line with the actual prices that were paid by consumers abroad, and hence the basis for tax was always significantly low. So, for example, if a mine was extracting 100 tons of coal, they would only report export of 40 tons, and they would pay taxes on the 40 tons and royalties on the 40 tons, whereas 60 tons could be exported illegally without any royalties or taxes to the government. And even the 40 tons that were exported may have been exported at a much lower price than that of market. And all this is all well documented through, entities in Singapore, Hong Kong, etc., which covered all this documentation legalities to ensure profiteering in the sector of commodities. And today, we have to say, we have observed this practice has stopped. And today, extraction and export are correlated. Market prices are ensured in invoices, and hence royalty collections and tax collections are in line with what is extracted. Of course, there's a pushback from producers because obviously profits are not that fantastic with this tax and royalty scenario. But they're trying to hold out and play a game of hide and seek for now, and trying to not really export and hoping that this thing will phase out and move back to where it was. But it's very clear today that that is not happening, and Prabowo's administration is very firm and not at all playing games of rhetoric. They mean business, and they will not allow for any commodities to leave Indonesia without its effective return to the government in terms of taxes and royalties. So I think it's a great success story, and the past where a small number of government officials or intermediaries who were profiteering from it has moved to become where the government is in control, and we hope that this will help the state budget to show strength. So that is what we see as three important success stories which are really effective on the ground. And for the third point as well, I feel we can give Prabowo's government another 20 points, as a good grade for breaking this untouchable zone of the export mafia, especially on the commodity side, and bringing it down to where it should be into the real books of the government. So that's a great achievement. Consider the timeline of just about a year that Prabowo has been in government. So that is good. So we have seen now the 60 points out of 100 where the government is looking good. Well, of course, nothing is completed. There is still room for improvement, and a lot of structural reforms are still being looked into and evaluated and effectively executed. So, but I think leakage has overall literally stopped or absolutely been minimized to a very small amount. So this is the good news. So now going forward, we also notice that there are some steps being taken, but we haven't seen results yet on the ground with regard to imports. This again has been a big issue because Indonesia has a very major portion of its imports being illegal imports, wherein imports have been imported at first, double invoicing, where again, countries like Hong Kong, Singapore were used to change invoices, which, like, say, for example, you were importing a product of $10, they were changing invoices to make it just a $1, and as a result, the taxes were on $1. Number two, they were also even importing different items actually in the container versus what was in the invoice. And hence, now the government has changed their standard operating procedures, where Prabowo has instructed our Minister of Finance, Purbaya, and we see that they have taken steps of moving away from sampling of containers to 100% checks. That's a serious step forward, guys. It's not an easy task. So they've recruited a huge number of personnel in the customs department to go about this task. And secondly, interestingly, Purbaya was also said invoices will not be accepted based on face value from presented by the importers. The tax department or customs has to reprice all these items based on a 100% container verification to that of market prices to determine the tax or import taxes on that. But as I said, at this stage, actions and symptoms are noticeable, and but we haven't seen a clear outcome yet. And this outcome, of course, will be tested in the next month, where during Ramadan, consumer demand just shoots up. And this is when actually biggest portion of these imports come in illegally. and flood the market. So we will see in the next month or so whether this policy has actually held ground and imports have transformed to that of a legal process and legal prices and legal taxes and duties, customs duties being paid to the government. So we'll see whether this is realized by them in the next month or two, and we'll report back on that to see what happens on the ground. But this is again a major step forward, because the mafia in the import side is, talking about billions of dollars of gains offshore because of all this. And this is quite a challenge that they are taking up. They seem to be very serious about it, at least. Another issue that we notice is that the situation right now is quite volatile. As we have seen, the stock market having a significant correction in the last couple of weeks. And we've also seen so much pressure on the rupiah, where the rupiah has weakened to pass almost or hovering around 17,000. And we also know that going forward, debt refinancing is going to be a big challenge. And this is probably also a pushback from external forces which are trying to, indicate unhappiness with Indonesia's policies on fuel issues, where you can see the competition is right now for the last 6 months having no fuel to sell. You can imagine the losses they're accumulating in these on their investments, and obviously they are not going to sit back and just be not finding ways to push back. So through their political alliances, they're probably pushing back to pressure the rupiah down and probably kill the stock market, and probably start also later on putting difficulties on refinancing of debt, which would just, cripple our fiscal situation in Indonesia. So these are challenges that are real on the ground with all these policies that are being put forward by the government. So this is something, I guess, we'll have to wait and see who is having the strong arm and who is having a better strategy. And Prabowo, our dear president, a good chess player like our previous president, Mr. Jokowi, and who will checkmate who and win these scenarios to move forward. So that, I think, will be seen in the next few months. We are in the cornerstone of this situation, and hence we'll see what changes and what strategies are being put forward to manage these risks. So I think this is, but at least they are addressing the concerns by a proposal from the stock market to change the float size into public, and numerous other initiatives are being taken by the Ministry of Finance, Bank Indonesia, etc. So there's definitely action going on, but we'll see whether the results will play out. So that is what I have to report at this stage. What we can say is that if we see these positive trends, at least these three wins that we see on Pertamina, the agriculture sector, and that of exports, we hope all the other things can also follow through, and we should be hopeful, constructive in our criticism, but also give due credit where it's due. Just because they are being silent and not creating propaganda of the success doesn't mean it's not a success. So I think we need to give them the credit where it's due, and I think we should also have confidence in our President Prabowo and his administration, who seems to be very much on their toes to make things happen for the betterment of the Indonesian public. So adios with that. Thank you.